right, I'm going to start up. The first thing as we start, if you look here, I got this email from Doug that was literally sent last Friday. And I'm going to read it to you. Jeff, it looks like we might be able to employ a significant number of interns from now until the end of the year. Brian Mogg, and Brian's the guy who runs their programming department there, says the first task will be documentation, then perhaps UAT, and I'm not even sure what that is, and other such things. If you can provide me with a list of names and skill sets for your students, we can match them up with opportunities. The interns last year made $10 an hour, so I'd guess that salary will remain the same. Let me know if you have any questions. So what I did was all the second year people, I sent them back a list, plus all the classes I know you'd taken. All right? If you think you might be interested in this, get together a resume as quickly as possible. Don't send it to Doug, send it to me. All right? I don't care if it's PDF, I don't care if it's Word, or whatever you want. But if you're interested in this, I don't know what the hours will be. But I know they're pretty much open there 24 hours a day. So I believe they would work around your schedule as best they possibly can. All right? I can't say that for sure, but if I have people who are interested, then what I'll do is if you want to even send it on the email, I'd be available during these hours, fine. If you're not interested, just don't respond. Just don't send me an email. All right? But I know some of you said you wanted to get an internship, and many of you who said you wanted an internship were looking for one that's paid. This is one that's paid. All right? And I don't know what the people do. I know that he had people there last year. He had a couple networking students that were interning there, and he had a couple of, believe it or not, human resources people that were interning there. He has not had programming interns before. That's because Brian and I was introduced to him. I shook hands with him as Doug was walking me through the Data Dimensions plant, but I have not talked with him at all. I'm hoping that when we have our IT advisory committee meeting, that he brings Brian along so he can see what we're all about, etc. Now, the good news is they have hired probably a half dozen of our graduates, including Kim, who graduated from here last May. She's there now as a VB.NET programmer. They've also, years ago, they hired Jason Krieger, who has sat in classes the last few years. He's already got the degree from here. They also hired Jared Parks. All right, and years ago they hired Kelly Edge, and she made it up to where she was a supervisor. Then she got married, had a kid, so she quit. All right, but so what I'm saying is they've been good to this place, so it may lead to something. So if you're looking for something where you want to get a job as an internship that might lead to full-time employment, get together a resume and a cover letter as soon as you can, and just email them to me. I'll bundle them all up and I'll send them to Doug. Doug has questions. What I'll do is I'll ask that some Tuesday or some Thursday that he come in here and talk to you about it. All right, maybe he'll even bring Brian in. I don't know. So that's the first thing. All right, second thing, and I mentioned this, so if you were here a little bit earlier this morning, you probably heard this. Otherwise, you didn't. Remember last week when my screen looked like that, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was? The problem was pilot error on my part. Just like you can do when you're working with, for example, Notepad++, if I do a Control-, it'll shrink down the size of the screen. And I just never tried it. Don't ask me why. I just never did. All right, so in the interim, what I had done is I had totally uninstalled Joomla thinking that was the problem. Well, that wasn't the problem. So I've started to rebuild the stuff again, but as you can see, I'm now behind where you guys are. All right, in other words, I did come in here, and I did this right before class. I went to news, so I've got news. There's the bad photography exhibition, and I can click on the read more link. That's the same stuff that we went through last time. So I've got all that stuff in there. I've got my version of the logo, and I'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. All right, so that's in there. But the point is, if I go back to the main page now, all right, if I just go back to my main page, what you're going to see is not very much. Okay? No excuse, I just didn't do it. If you want, I can tell you about the 17C programs I wrote yesterday, but you probably don't care. All right? And as far as that goes, just so you know, that assignment's out there, and I also emailed it to all of you yesterday. And it's also out on the P drive, and it's out on Blackboard. Yeah, so it's out on all of them. Now, Mark, I think you were the one who asked this, but it could have been somebody else, about using that pixel art. All right? And what I did literally, and it's again out in a folder with today's date on it. So if I go out to the P drive for the class, you know the drill by now. I don't have to run through it with you. But if I go out to the P drive for the class and I look in the folder with today's date on it, there's two things in there. First is what I just showed you. All right, that's the logo I made. Did I spend a lot of time on it? Does it look like I spent a lot of time on it? All right. But the other thing that I did was I found this online. Let's make a simple logo. So I left this out there too. And what it said here was to go out to Pixlr and go to editor, create a new image. I changed this because the one in the book they said was 270. So I made it 270 and 90. I clicked the transparent. I put the text in there. I went to their tools, and as you can see, mine doesn't look nearly as nice as theirs, but it's okay. All right. And I went in and looked at the drop shadow and stuff and played with that just a little bit, but I didn't spend a lot of time on it. All right, I didn't play at all with this stuff, so I didn't do anything with it. But I put that article out there, so if you're interested, all right, I know that Amanda said she went out and just literally got on the site and played with it too, and she's got a lot nicer logo than I have. All right, so that stuff was there. But like I said, I didn't really get very far as catching back up. So literally, I had it done before, and now it's not done anymore. So I will get that done, but I will get it done as soon as I can. So what I'm saying is, again, mine doesn't have much stuff in it right now. All right. So that said, what I want to do is I want to jump into chapter 5, which is in your book. And chapter 5 in the book starts on page 113. We're keeping up a good pace here. I hope we can continue that. All right. And what I had showed you earlier with this, and again, don't want to waste a lot of time on this, but semester schedule. If you look, we're in 9-1. So we're right on track right now. So again, my hope is sometime around the midway point in the semester, and believe it or not, some of it may go faster because I think it's chapter 11. I think that's the one. That one has got, literally has got most of the chapters on CSS. So I'm not going to cover that chapter. All right. So we'll go through chapter 5 as much as we can today. What we don't finish today, try to finish up by Thursday, and then just keep plugging along. My hope is that you have been following along with what's in the book and that you've been trying to go through the stuff yourselves. All right. Or you've been watching me do it, but you're probably better off doing it yourselves. So again, the idea is hopefully we'll have somewhere around 6 or 7 weeks left at the end of the semester where you'll be able to work just on this project. Okay? And I got to get the specs out there, which is another thing that's got to be put out there as soon as hopefully as I can. All right? So what they say here is now they're starting to talk about in chapter 5, in chapter 6, and in chapter 7, what they're telling you is, okay, what we've done is we've created this site in an hour. All right, we've made some changes to it, and we've added a little bit of content to it. So what we're going to do in chapter 5 right here is, as it says, we want to organize our content effectively. Then in chapter 6, we're going to work again on adding and editing articles, and then on chapter 7, we'll be creating an attractive homepage. All right, so that's basically when we get done with 5, 6, and 7, we've done the crux, so to speak, of this website that we'll be creating. Then what we'll do in later chapters, because there's still 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, but in chapter 8, for example, is all about working with menus. Chapter 9, I believe it is all about working with permissions. So right now, if you were to go and look at all the content that you've created thus far for your articles, there's like an author tagline in there, but unless you've set something else up, right now the author is going to say super user for every one of these. Because when you go in there and you create the administrator account and you don't create any other accounts under admin, everything is super user. And I'm not positive, but I believe at least with super user, that's basically just a ripoff from Unix or Linux land. All right, because that's what you are in Linux. So, for example, what I used to be able to do when I was working at AT&T is I could sit there and be on one of the mainframe machines. If I wanted to quick get to another mainframe machine and not leave the one I was on, I could type in SU followed by the machine name / my login. And then it would ask me for a password, and boom, it would log me into that system. The idea is similar. What we'll get to in chapter 9 is what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to set up different people who will have different rights on your site. All right. So right now, really, it's just you and it's the general public, for lack of better words. All right. But you might want other things. You might want, for example, and again, we'll get to this in Chapter 9, that if people register at your site, they're able to see content that non-registered people can't see. All right. You might want to give some users the ability to go and create articles, but not publish them. So maybe you, a super user, want to be able to do all that work, and we'll get to that in Chapter 9 also. All right. Then as we move on and as we finish up the book, then Chapter 10, we'll be making the most out of your site, extending Joomla. So we'll talk about some of the extensions that are available. Chapter 11, we'll talk about using other templates and working more with a template manager. Then Chapter 12 is on search engine optimization. So what I'm telling you is when we get done with 5, 6, and 7, we'll have the majority of the site done. Then it'll be just be some tweaking and prettying it up that we'll do in the last 4 or 5 chapters. All right. So as it says, what we want to do in this chapter, we've got 3 objectives in the middle here of page 113. Translate a basic sitemap to a workable blueprint for a Joomla-based site. Design a clear, scalable framework for your content. Group stuff that seems to be together. All right, and then use uncategorized pages to build sites that don't require a multi-level content. Let me just quickly go through that last one first. The author mentions that they give an example, and they say, imagine that you had somebody who had a yoga studio, okay? And they wanted you to create a website for them. It literally would have 5 pages, and it would never get more than that. You'd have like a home page, an About Me page, maybe a page about yoga, some kind of a sign-up form, and one other type of form. What the author is saying is if you have that kind of case that you know it's never going to get bigger and you want to use Joomla to build the website, then you wouldn't create any of these categories. You'd put everything under uncategorized. And if you say, I don't understand, that's what the chapter is about. All right, but I don't feel the need to spend a lot of time on that. Rather, what the author says here, they give you a crash course on site organization, and the author says right now, this is pretty much what you have. So if your home is level 0, then you've got really level 1 right here. This is not level 2. These are the articles. So you kind of look at it, if this was a folder, those would be folders underneath it. And you notice that Mission doesn't have anything underneath it, and Contact Us doesn't have anything underneath it. They're kind of leaf nodes, so to speak. So right now, the way that it's set up, you've got articles under news, you've got articles under art lectures, you've got articles under meetings. All right? So what the author is saying, this is a very basic type of sitemap. All right? And the author says that you want to expand that. Like to do what? Well, if you look on page 115 here, the author mentions in this bulletized list near the top of the page that the Corba people supposedly have contacted you. They want a few pages to introduce the founding members of Corba. They want facts on bad art, history, little-known facts, maybe FAQ, whatever it would be. Previews, or reviews rather, of bad art galleries, etc., and club activities. So what they're saying is you want to take what you had here when you had only 3 categories, and you want to start blowing it up a little bit. All right? Notice that what we want here is we want a new category that's called About Corba, and that'll have some articles in it too. This will be further refined in just a couple minutes also. But the idea is as the person that you're writing the site for, as that person gives you more and more things that they want in the site, all right, as they give you more and more things that they want in the site, this sitemap is going to grow. And what you might discover is, for example, where they've got About Corba, you might want to break that category right now into 2 subcategories underneath it. So again, it's starting to look almost like a regular sitemap for a, quote, regular website, unquote. Again, there's still 1 level only right now, level 0 and level 1. So it's really just 1 level under the main page. But there could conceivably be more to it. And that's what the author is talking about. All right? So notice they're adding to it even more. So what they're saying is they want us to come in here and add, right now, they want us to add a bad art category. And then they'll want us to add an art lectures category. I think we've got art lectures, we've got art lectures and club meetings right now. They want us to add a bad art category and About Corba category. Then under the bad art category, they want us to add a facts and a reviews category. All right? And this is, for lack of better words, unbelievably easy to do, because so far when you've added categories, when you've gone out to the category manager and you've added a new category, off to the side, what it said there is, where do you want this new category to reside? We haven't filled in anything yet. But as soon as you say you want it to reside, once you create bad art, you want it to reside under bad art, then when you create facts, boom, it'll be there. Then when you create reviews, boom, it'll be there. Get the idea? All right. Now, the author, too, I think at least, you may or may not agree with this, but I kind of like the way that he's been laying this out, in that, although it would be totally legit under bad art to have both articles and categories, I think it makes sense, if you're going to have a category and put subcategories underneath it, that you try to put all your articles into those subcategories. Does that make sense? All right. Again, to me, that makes the most sense. Now, if you say, no, I've got a real good reason for doing it another, then do it another way. It's not that doing it that way would be wrong, okay? So, again, notice what we have here. They're breaking it up even more and saying, you know what? Really, the art lectures and the club meetings are really activities. So now they're breaking it up even more. So, again, we started with this that you saw here. This is what we did through the last chapter, where we had a news category, an art lectures category, and a meetings category. And then they're saying we want to come in and we want to add an About Corba category and a Bad Art category. Then under Bad Art, we want facts and reviews. Then we're looking at it a little further. They're saying, you know, the lectures and the club meetings, we want to really put those under activities. So ideally, I think that when we get done with this chapter, under home, we're now going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 categories. All right. Our existing news category. We're going to add a new bad art category, under which we're going to put facts and reviews subcategories. We're going to add a new activities category. Then all we have to do is go back to the art lectures and the meeting, and right now they don't have a category associated with them. So we'll click that drop down that's off on the right, and we'll choose the activities after we create it. All right? And we will create a new About Corba category. So you'll notice that when we get down to the bottom level, on the very bottom, we're either going to have articles or it's going to be a leaf node. All right? So that's what much of the chapter is about. Now, the author mentions here then on the top of page 117, says grouping content, all right, is basically, it's going to be you and working with your end user as far as how they want that set up. And I will tell you, again, what I'm about to tell you, you can laugh, you can smile, or whatever, not react, but it's not meant to be funny. A good news, if you always want to have work, is that when you let the end user be involved in the process, typically they're going to give you specs that later they're going to realize were stupid. I don't mean all of them, but some of the stuff that they give you. All right, I've given you this example before. I'll always remember this. It sounds like I'm making it up, but it's one of those things that's too stupid to be believed. When I worked that year at Woodward Governor, the first week that I was there, they wanted me to build an order entry system for them. I said, fine, what do you want it in? They said, what languages do you know? And I mentioned all of them. Like but at the time there were about 11 languages, and I gave them a bunch of database packages, and they said, you can use any one of them you want. All right? And then they decided they really wanted a database package. And at the time, that's how long ago this was, there really wasn't Access. It was DBase, if you remember DBase. And I did it in DBase 3. Okay? Well, the guy who ran the place, he was a little different. And he wanted the screens to be this really morbid purple color. I mean, it was hard because it was a really off color. And I knew they wouldn't want to keep that, but he said, no, we want this. Then he wanted a font that looked really bad with it. All right? I think it was because there was stuff he liked. And then when you removed a record, he wanted the funeral march played. You know, dum, dum, da, dum, type of thing. Which I said, you're not going to want this. I said, your end users aren't going to want this. I said, the people who use this won't want this. No, if they don't want it, they can just turn their sound off. So I built it for him. And it was the end of the first day when we put it into operation. He goes, can you change the color, and can you get rid of that damn music? But again, that kind of thing is always going to happen. Sometimes, again, what's going to happen is you'll say to somebody, okay, what do you want? And they'll go, well, show me what you think I want. And so you take a stab at it. And a lot of times it's called a stab in the dark on purpose, because they'll look at it and they'll go, now I know what I don't want. What's that? Anything you just did. I don't want any of that. That's why when you start to build something for someone who has no requirements, typically don't spend a lot of time on it. Rough something up. In fact, the author here says although there are tools that you can use to create these kind of sitemaps, he recommends something like the back of a napkin, literally. Just sketching it out and start to draw it out that way. All right. So they give you some tips down here at the bottom of page 117. You can take a look at them. Tips on choosing main categories. Is it useful to choose categories based on the main inner intentions of people, or it can be useful? In other words, why are they there? All right. The other thing you want to make sure of is they give you some common choices here. I'm not going to read them to you, but depending on the industry for which you're building the site, some of these may make no sense whatsoever. If you're doing something for a company and it's internal, products might not make any sense. Catalog might not make any sense. So there might be things you don't use, and there might be other things that aren't shown here that you do use. I very much agree with what the author says, though, on this third bullet. Try not to have more than 5 to 7 main categories. You may or may not be aware of this, but for example, I remember having to take a class on this many years ago, where they said that at the time everybody was doing PowerPoint for everything. And they said never put more than 7 bullets on a page in a PowerPoint, on a PowerPoint slide. Why is that? Anybody want to guess? Not all at once. But that basically, they say 7 is about all the human brain can comprehend at one time. And 5 is actually even better. All right? So what they're saying here is, especially if you're going to do this and you're going to put it along the top, all right, when you do all this stuff, notice there's 3 things here right now. All right? And there's, 5 here. But if you're going to especially do it along the top, if it gets too cluttered, you know what that looks like already. All right? And it's probably not going to be what the customer wants. All right. So transferring your sitemap to Joomla, page 118. The author says, let's take a look at this and look at it in a little bit more detail. Then what he does is he explains what every single thing that's in here is. Again, you may or may not believe this, but I really did take the time to read this book before I chose it. I'm going to be very interested in what you thought of this book. Packt Publishing writes a lot of books like this, where they literally build a project throughout the book. I like this kind of thing. You may or may not. And I try to listen to what you want. All right? And some people have told me, oh, yeah, you get more books like the Java book. I love books that Gaddis does. Other people have told me, don't use Java or don't use Gaddis. I hate his books. So, you're never going to be able to please everybody. All right, that's never going to happen. But again, I like to go with the overriding opinion. So we're already in week 3. So when we get to week 9 and you do the course evaluation, please put a sentence or 2 down about the book. Liked it, hated it. And if you did or didn't, just put I liked it because, and just put something down. I didn't like it because. All right. So they explain everything there on 118. And then they get it over and get on to 119. And on 119, this is what I mentioned before. In this sitemap, you placed all the articles in categories, but the author has mentioned at the end of the chapter, if you've got a very small site that just has a few pages that you're fairly certain will never change, you may just put everything, instead of creating categories, you may just sit there and put in articles. That might be all you do. Remember, what they call categories here are basically containers. All right, they're almost the equivalent of folders that we deal with all the time. All right. The other thing they mention, and again, it's a good point here near the top of the paragraph, where the author says, another good use for uncategorized articles is a placeholder for things that have not yet been assigned a category. So you can put them in, you can put a bunch of them in there and then create a new category and drag them over. Also remember, when you're working with this stuff, there's published and there's unpublished. So if you're creating an article and the article is not yet finished, you can do all you want to do with it, and if you set its status to unpublished, other people are not going to be able to see that article until you put it into published status. All right. So bottom of 119. How do you turn a sitemap into a website? Does this look familiar? Because it's pretty much the same kind of thing we did in the last chapter. All right. Organize, add contents, and display them. So step 1, it says create the content containers. Step 2, fill the containers with articles. Step 3, put your contents on display. All right. So again, that's, step 4, make everything findable by turning it on, by creating the menus. All right. And the author says there, and what about the special content stuff? All right. Again, as it says, on a dynamic website, you're likely to have more than just articles. All right. Right now, really, when you think about it, when we go back here and take a look at this, that's about all we have is that picture that's right there, which we'll get rid of sooner or later, and our logo. There's not a whole lot of stuff in here. If we do click on an article, again, the only one I have is my news. All right. Yeah, there we get a picture, and there we get a picture. But on our home page right now, or at least on mine, there's not a whole lot of pictures. It's not pretty to look at type of thing. And again, beauty, as they say, is in the eye of the beholder. But what the author is getting to here is before you go and do all this, plan it out. All right? And it's very easy to move stuff around. You've already seen that. All right? So the first thing the author does in here is has you come in there and go through and create a brand new category. And this will be an About Corba category. So again, I'm thinking we're at the point where you can all do this. All right? So if I go back here, all right, to Category Manager, and I come in and I want to create a new category. I click here. You've already seen this. All right. And again, the big thing here is if we wanted to go and right now create a category, create something and put it under news. So let's say we're just going to call this sub news. I'm not going to keep this, but let's say I wanted to. Right now, there's no parent, which means that when you create the menu link for it, all right, by default, when you create that menu link for it, it's going to show in here. But if you want it to show after or underneath news or underneath home or whatever, all right, then you're going to have to do that with the way that we just looked at. So you're going to click down here and you're going to choose one of these. That's the only change that you have to make. All right, so they have you do this category or recategorization here. So what they want us to do is to come through here and create this new category that they want called About Corba. About C-O-R-B-A. All right. And again, that alias that's in there, notice it says auto-generate from title. All right. And what happens is if you don't put anything in here, it'll put about-Corba in there for you. That'll automatically be generated. The alias is important because it's used sometimes with the meta tags and sometimes for search engine optimization. All right, which we'll get to in a later chapter. All right. And they say in here, so we went through here, did all that, did About Corba, all right, leave the other values unchanged and choose Save and Close. All right. And now, notice there's our About Corba. So it's in there. All right. So what they say is, it says what we want to do now is, according to our sitemap, the next few categories we need are nested. One category, bad art, will contain two subcategories, facts and reviews. Well, we don't have a bad art that I can see right now, so we could come through here and we could create another one. So we could come through here and again, come through here and say bad art. All right, you know the drill by now. So again, I can come in here and I can create and click Save and Close. All right, and now as we come up, there's our, well, somewhere it'll be in there, but bad art will be in there. Unless I screwed up. But, page, there you go, page 2, thank you. All right, so there's bad art. All right, so now when we come back and we want yet a new category, why? Because it said here that we wanted under bad art, we were supposed to have facts and reviews. So I want to come in here and I want to do facts, but remember when I do facts, now the parent will be bad art. All right, so I want to do a save and new now because I want to stay here. So it put that in here, and the other one was reviews. All right, so reviews, and we want that one also to go under bad art. All right, so we go and we do all that stuff. All right, so it's been published. So now I guess we can save and close. All right, then we've got to go back to the menu manager, which we'll do in just a second, and put the link in to the ones that we just created. All right. So what I just showed you right here, and hopefully I didn't go through that fast. All right. But we went through content, category manager, add new category. We chose under there, add a new, we clicked the add new articles category button, that green button. The title was about Corba, and we left everything else unchanged. All right. Then I went in and did it again, but put bad art in there and created that one. Then under bad art, okay, we put in, what was it, facts and reviews. All right. So all the stuff that's shown right there, up through page 121, we just did. Then for whatever reason, and I'm not sure what the reason is, but turning up to 122, the author appeared here to think that you couldn't understand what he had done so far. So he goes down and says, it might totally be possible and plausible that you could go down several layers, thick, so to speak, in here. One thing, remember, and I've said this in other classes, maybe Arinda said this to you last year, I don't know. But in an ideal world on a website, you can get anywhere you want in a website in 3 clicks. All right? Again, that doesn't always work that way because, again, as a website gets more and more complex, it may be harder and harder to do that. But what you can shoot for is the majority of people who come to your site, if you know that they'll be coming to your site for a certain reason. And most of the time, that's what it is. If it's an e-commerce site, hopefully they're coming to your site to buy something, right? So what you want to do is you want to be able to get them to that page as quickly as possible. You want them to be able to get from the page where they're going to be buying things and seeing products to a page where they can check out as quickly as possible. All right? And just go ahead and look under bad or websites that suck or look it up online. You can find plenty of sites that are up there that you might have to click through 5, 6, closer to 10 levels to get where you want to get. And the bad thing is if you make it too hard for someone, you know this, they're going to leave. And that's not the goal. Now, if it's an intranet site, if it's for a company and it's the only site you have, well, then they're hosed. Even if you set it up poorly, they're going to have to still go through it. But sooner or later, someone will probably let you know, hey, this site really isn't set up very well. All right. So the author says here on page 121, well, here is another way of looking at it. And if you had, for example, if you had a camera shop, you might do something that looked more like this. All right. Again, kind of the bad news about this, and this is what I'm trying to get across and amplify to the first year people. In there, I'm hitting them hard right away with HTML5 and CSS3, but it's mainly so far been HTML5. That there's no right and wrong way of doing this. In other words, Mark and I could be creating something, and where I've got this, he might decide that no, there needs to be another level in here someplace, and he might be just as right as I am. All right, he may have a really good reason for doing it, or as we talked about earlier, it may be just that your client says, no, you're doing it this way. And your client might say, you're doing it this way, I want it done like this. Then if your client, if his or her or their customers keep coming up to him and saying, why do you have this? We never use it. All right, type of thing. All right, and then they might come back to you and ask you to change it. Like I said, Mike will tell you that there's plenty of work out there if you want to do that, Mike. If you want to do maintenance work. Because there's always going to be people who don't like the way something is laid out, or they want something tweaked, or they want something added, or they want something removed. There's always going to be business for people like that out there. All right, and the question is, how easy do you make that for somebody? To me, if you set up a website for somebody, and this had just come to me as I was starting the lecture, Zane, for you, for gifts, you could show them this and say, hey, I'm learning this in my class. I think I could make your entire site. I could do it in WordPress, and it'd be very simple to do, and it'd be very simple for you to maintain, as an example. And I'm not saying you do want to do that or you don't. But if you wanted to do that and you showed it to them, they might say, well, what would maintaining it involve? And if you're working with a neophyte, if you're working with somebody who doesn't know a lot about computers, they might find working with that a lot easier. And they might say, we're not going to be having you come in here all the time because, after you leave, then they got to bring somebody else up to speed, etc. All right, so again, it depends on the company, it depends on the site. I know for years, for the last 4 or 5 or 6 years, we've been working with big brothers, big sisters of Rock Green and Jefferson County. And they keep saying to me, yeah, you guys keep making it easier for us, but we keep needing you to come back in here and make changes for us anyway. All right. Part of the reason for that is the people who are working on for Big Brothers Big Sisters move on and go to other companies. All right. In fact, Tony Reynolds last year did work for the, I think it was for the Y in Janesville, and I noticed the name on there. That was my contact from Big Brothers Big Sisters. So she left there and went from one place to another place. That kind of stuff happens all the time. All right. So as it says, they want you to create the new activity in there called categories, or called activities, I'm sorry, and then open the art lectures in the category manager, and all they want you to basically do is to come in here on the right hand side. What you'll end up doing is you'll change that right now, if it's has no parent, you'll want to change the parent on it. So again, all they want you to do is come in here and basically, again, come back and change it so your setup is similar to what we saw back on page 118. All right, so when you get done, you should be doing that. All right. What I'm going to do is literally, I'm going to talk until about break time, okay? Whatever we get to by break time. And then the rest of the period, I'm going to say, now, you go do this. Everything we've done up till this point. All right, and I'm going to give you the second hour to do that. Then Thursday, whatever we don't get to, we'll do that stuff for the first hour. And then you'll have the rest of the time to work on that. I think there's something to be said to have you do this while it's fresh in your mind. Some of you, I can already tell, are working on it or working on something else anyway, and that's fine. All right, but I think you get more out of it working on it, boom, boom, boom. Plus, then there's not a lot of homework. You can't say, well, I didn't have time to finish this. All right. So again, the idea is when we get to that point, and I'm moving all the way up to page 126 here, when you get done with all this stuff, notice by default what it looks like. All right? If you click on the activity page, if you don't put any articles there, all it shows you is the stuff that's right there. All right? But they did put an article in it, but by default, these hyperlinks that are in here, the links, they go at the top for your subcategories. And then the author says if you don't like that, you can just go back in and move it to the bottom. So this type of thing right here, the subcategories might be stuff on your site. They could even be linking to stuff on another site. All right, but probably they're going to be stuff in your site. So again, you've got activities. So somebody gets to activities, there'll be some kind of a main article here, one or more main articles. Then if you want art lecture activities, you'll click that link. Club meeting activities, you'll click that link. Type of an idea. Hopefully that just is intuitive enough that it makes sense to you. All right. Then the author oftentimes says in here, and I like this, you may or may not, but I like what the author says here on 127. All right. It says when categories contain subcategories, the default is to, requires visitors to click their way through. So they say, if you want to make some changes, go through these steps. What this is, more than anything else, is you set up your content. Ideally, if you get hired by a company, the content will be set up for you already. There are going to be some companies that will tell you, we don't know how to write. All right? And for example, if I were to go back right now and to start my own business where I'd wanted to hang my shingle and I wanted to create websites for everybody, including all their content, I think I could be successful at that. Not even because I'm that good at this, but because my first degree was in journalism. So if they give me their content, I could sit there and I could put it into a format they probably liked and wanted. All right, but usually that's not going to be the case. Usually they'll have the content there already. It might be in brochures, it might be in articles, it might be in HTML, it might be someplace, but they'll already have the content. And I mentioned this before class. I was talking with Zane, and I'll just show you this. Not that one. I'll show you this. That this is the site previously that Ryan was working on, Ryan Hansen. But Ryan is now taking classes both in this program and in the program that's over in Milton. So he doesn't going to have the time to do it anymore. The point is, this is the site for the Gifts Men's Shelter. All right? And if you notice our schedule, for example, well, there it is. That's not real good when you look at it, but every page looks like this. It's got the Humongo logo, and it's got all this stuff that's shown here. The reason I'm telling you this is they've got the content basically that they want. It might have to be updated a little bit, but they've got the content that they want. What they want is they want it to look acceptable and not every page to look like this. The woman who I talked to said, I don't know who picked green, but we hate it. So they want that changed. They want a small logo, but they want it to appear like in the top of every page. And then, like you've seen, rather than having the navigation there, they want it to run along the side, the top. All right? But the point is, they've already got the content that they want by and large. It might have to be updated a little bit. All right? It might have to be tweaked a little bit. Mike W. was telling me that last week he was looking at a site for a marketing place, and he said that some of the articles in there, and I know he said some of the Facebook and some of the other stuff, hadn't been updated in somewhere between 2 and 3 years. Well, if they bring you in and they want you to work on their site, hopefully they'll have some content, you know, that they want to update. Sometimes they'll say, just put some junk out there. All right, it goes in every single way. Well, you know, you can always go out to lipsum.com and grab junk. All right, but that's literally what it is. But you can show them that, and you can put it in there as filler. All right, and again, all I'm saying is that when we looked at this before, you know, really, right here, when I go to my news page, that's all that is it's just filler. That's all that is it's just filler. All right, really, our whole site right here, right now, is filler as we're learning to use the package. It's funny because I had one of the first-year people talk to me, and she said, "Okay, I'm in the program, and I've got a question for you because I'm a little bit confused." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" And she said, "Well, what my confusion is, what's a typical customer, and what are they going to ask me for on a website?" And I said that it doesn't exist. And they said, "What doesn't exist?" I said, "A typical customer, because there's no two customers you're going to have that are going to want the same thing." Yeah, you're right. And some of them will start it themselves and then maybe think to you, I don't need your help. All right. And other people will say, well, I'll call you if I need you. The problem is if they're going to call you when they need you, a lot of times it's because they think they can do it themselves. Then they get in so far over their head that they've really mucked up the site. All right. That can be good news for you because then rather than you being able to do something in days, it might be weeks. And even if you think it'll take you days, they go, well, this will probably take you 6 weeks. And you look at it and you say, you know, I could probably do that in an afternoon. You tell me, you know, I could probably do it in half that time. You still got plenty of time to look at it, refine it, and make it look nice. And they're happy because you only spent half the time that you know, they said they were going to use. All right? All right, next on page 129, I'm going to just get through this particular section, and then we'll just stop it there for the day. They talk about refining the site structure. And again, the author says here, you probably won't get your site structure right in one go unless you've got a really simple site that remains fairly static. Is that a bad thing? No, it isn't. Well, it's bad in that it's one of those things that you have to do. It's kind of like maintenance work. Even moving stuff around is kind of like maintenance work. But as it says, as Joomla goes ahead, hopefully more and more things are going to be being done for you, and a lot of it will be drag and drop or click or choose this or choose that. All right. So they talk in here about moving content from one category to the other. And as it says here, I'm on 129, and I'm going to go over the stuff till 130, and the top of 131, then we're going to just call it a period for now. But the author says the main activities category contains a couple of articles you may want to move to the news category. You're always going to have that. And also remember that if you've got something that's news, you know, when we looked at this, all right, and we have here, you know, that's our news, right? That's what I just clicked. The stuff that if somebody is going to take the trouble that either over here or if you put news up here that they're going to navigate to news, it should be topical. All right? I know, and it sounds so simple, but you probably, you know, it's amazing. I look at, there's a middle school that's right down the road from my house. And they finally changed it last week, all right? But they had something, you know, for a while they had stuff in there in the middle of August to the end of August, you know, come here on July 25th to sign up. I mean, it was outdated. It was silly to have that thing there. Now, that wasn't a website, but the idea is the same. that the stuff that you're going to put out here should be topical in nature. Even on your homepage, whatever this is that you decide once you actually create it should be something that's topical and ideally something that changes on a fairly consistent basis. All right. May sound like a real simple thing to say, and that's fine if it does. But again, if we go out here, all right, think about it. The way that this site is currently set up, that area is pretty much constant. You can change what goes in there, but the field itself is constant. But at least they're smart enough that if you go in and you click again, all right, it should change. And you should be able to click your way through it and at least find 3, 4, 5 different things. It should be randomly changing, right? Why? Well, a couple reasons. First, it makes it a little more topical. Second, not everybody wants marketing, right? All right. So a person could go their way through there, and I noticed the one that's not coming up in here is the web analyst stuff, which is interesting. But I did send him an email, and I found out that the person I'd sent the email to was the wrong person to send it to. So I sent it to them, and I haven't either. And but supposedly they're going to change it because now we are web software developer. All right. Well, they got sent the email. I mean, I can show you the email if you don't believe me, but I did send it to them. All right. So they say to navigate over to the Content Article Manager, select the items you want to move from the meetings category. All right. In the example, they say it's just this one, the Hideous Owners or Art Clubs meeting, Art Owners meeting. Click the batch button, which is near the top in the upper right-hand corner. A pop-up box comes up. You'll select copy in there. Notice the difference. It may not sound like much. All right. But do you want to copy it or do you want to move it? All right. And then click process. And it does it for you. And you'll notice that if you do that, when we first did it, the category was club meetings, but we chose it and we chose move, and then it went to news. That's all there is to change it. You can change multiple things at once if you want to. I'd recommend until you develop a comfort level with it, just do no more than 1 or 2 at a time. All right, and work your way that way. So the author says, you've understood the real-life challenge of content management. Remember that more than anything else, Joomla is a CMS. It's a content management system. So the idea is it allows you to build a site which you are able to, after you understand how it works, quickly update. So do inserts, updates, and deletes pretty much on the fly. And that's what we've been learning in these first 5 chapters. All right. So the author says sometimes, this last thing I'll cover today, sometimes you might want to move an entire subcategory and all its contents to another main category. All right. The author says try this out for yourself. You could always move it and then move it back too to get some practice. All right. Now, when it comes to the day where I give you your requirements and you start thinking about what you're going to work on a site, I'm not going to tell you to do stuff like this. I'm not going to say, now make sure that you put it in five categories. Then make sure you change it to 6 categories and make at least one of them a subcategory. I'm not going to do that. But what I will ask is that when you create this, that you'll show me, not on a napkin, but on some kind of package, how you plan your site structure, to be laid out. And I will expect it to be at least a few levels deep. Depending on how complex it is, it might only be 2 or 3 levels deep. If it's something that's a little bit more complex, you might make it more complex now, even if you're not going to add stuff for a while, which is fine too. But again, what I'm hoping is this is one of the things that you create in here that you'll be able to showcase next semester when you're going through the design and implementation projects class. All right, and you get up there and you give your little shtick about yourself for 10 minutes or so. You say, well, yeah, earlier I built this. All right, and the idea is if you do that, all right, let's say that you get it up to a certain point this semester. You go, I'll work on it next semester, and then you never do. Then you may not want to show it as one of the things at the end of the semester that you're working on. I've had people do that they'll go to a site that they worked on previously. Now the site's broken. All right, it's like, geez, I don't know why this is broken. Then you just look embarrassing when you're up there, and you get embarrassed. All right, so we'll pick it up next time. There's about 10 pages left in the chapter. We'll talk about renaming the categories, which is pretty easy to do. All right, and after that, we'll quickly look at some of the things that are in the menu options, and then finally building the site without categories, and I've already gone through some of that stuff. So my guess is that next lecture will take somewhere by at the latest, the most it'll take is the amount that this took. It'll probably take less than that. I'm going to try to catch up so that my site looks the way it's supposed to look. I'm going to try to do that between 8 and 9 today. All right? And then you'll have the second half. So my hope is that by a week from today, by the time we get to chapter 6, all right, which will be, what, the 9th, so it's on page 143, you'll be all caught up. All right? Yours may not look exactly like mine. Your logo might look a lot nicer. Yours may look a hell of a lot better than mine, and that's fine. All right? But like I said, when we are all done with this part of your grade will be based on you doing this site. So I'm trying to give you an hour today, and I'll try to give you at least an hour on Thursday to work on that to get caught up. All right? Questions? All right. That's all that I had.